Have you ever wondered how far can science go? Well, I bet most of you have heard some of the most crazy experiments and thought, those people are insane. And yeah, I can't really blame you for that because you are kinda right. Because of those people, subjects expose some really disgusting conditions, but they still help us understand our nature, so we can't really blame them. Eventually, when the topic is science, everything is listed, isn't it? But if you go too far, should you really go? I guess this is a topic that we are going to be talking about today. I'll be talking about the most insane, or if you want to say that, unethical experiments that has done throughout the history. If you're ready, we can start. The Stanford Prison Experiment, or aka CPE. The experiment ran in the 1971 from 15th to 21st August, and as you can understand by the name, it took place in Stanford University, California. The experiment led by Dr. Philip Zimbardo, one of the lecturers from Stanford University Psychology Department. One summer day in the basement of Stanford University, Zimbardo occupied a single corridor to perform this experiment. It was going to be a 2 week simulation of a prison environment. It's probably the most known psychology experiment because people can easily relate it. The experiment shows us how people accept the roles that are given to them and how people who got power corrupt by the time. Zimbardo published a newspaper that he was searching for 24 male students and he was going to pay $15 per day to them. By today's value, it's about up or down $101. The students that applied to the experiment separated into two groups, guardians and prisoners. The ones who got prisoners didn't just come to the university. Instead, to get them into the role, they get them arrested in front of their house and experienced every step of a real arresting. They took their fingerprints and accused them of armed violence. And finally, they got into their cells. Zimbardo told guardians to be mean in order to make prisoners listen to their orders, but he specifically warned them not to resort to violence. And to make the environment more realistic, they gave uniforms, wooden sticks, and to minimize eye contact, sunglasses to guardians, and prisoner outfits to prisoners who were chained up as well. They weren't even calling prisoners by their name, and just used their assigned numbers. As the experiment went on, some of the prisoners blocked the gate of their cell by beds and got naked to protest. They were seriously rebelling against the guardians, but with the help of fire extinguishers, they took control again. The rebels faced with consequences, of course. They got locked into a dark room, which is named as the Hall by the Guardians. But it wasn't going to be that innocent and give punishment to ones have deserved to get punished. They started to punish even when they didn't eat their lunch and locked them to the hall. They were getting more sadistic every day and even separated the cells for rebels and not rebels. They took rebels' beds and forced them to sleep on cold metal. They even started to resort violence even though they are told not to. They started ordering them to do push-ups randomly and didn't let them to use bathrooms. Instead, they forced prisoners to do what they have to in a bucket because they forgot that they were in an experiment and thought they are the authority. But they weren't the only one that who forgot they were in an experiment. Prisoners did as well. Day by day, they started getting more coward. They started losing their minds. Like, actually. The first one to go lost his mind just after 36 hours since the experiment started. Prisoner 8612. As a definition of Zimbardo, he started to exhibit crazy behaviors. Zimbardo tells the story as he is screaming, yelling, swearing, and having some kind of tantrums. To agree that he is really in a bad mood and lost his mind, it took our time, but at the end we released him and reminded his real personality and life. And as the days went by, prisoners started accusing each other of snitching. They were separated into rebels and not rebels, even among themselves. These events ended as the prisoner 819 had crisis. And to help this guy who was crying non-stop in his cell, they called a priest, but he rejected to talk and he said that he wants a doctor instead. But at the end, when Zimbardo understands that he cannot control him either, he decided to remind him that he is an experiment and released him. While those were happening, prisoners were making fun of him by telling that Prisoner 819 did a bad thing. Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
Prisoner 819 did a bad thing.
At the day 5, they finally let prisoners to see their families. But in order to prevent them into not getting out of the role, they were still acting like they were in a prison. They had to wait for hours just to see their loved ones for 10 minutes. Their families were shocked by the scenery and could hardly believe these all happened in 5 days. Some of them even threatened Zimbardo by telling they are going to call their lawyers. Some of Zimbardo's colleagues has came to see how the experiment went, and they were shocked as well. By telling him this is not ethic anymore, and he is not acting as the neutral prisoner warden that he has to. And because of all of these warnings made, Zimbardo had to end the experiment at the day 6, 8 days before it has to be. He still gave them the full price though. He had conversations with each of them one by one and told them the results. And after a week he made them a survey by asking them what do they think, as some time has passed now, and wanted them to express everything they are feeling. To understand and get all the details, you can read the book named The Lucifer Effect, written by Zimbardo himself, or the 2 movies based on this experiment, named Das Experiment and The Stanford Prison Experiment. Well, I guess I don't need to mention that this experiment is not appropriate to ethic rules, but you can say that it is because the subjects were willing to come there. Well, here is the deal, undue anti-Semitism. You are offering financial awards to people who are shorting money, and you know that they are definitely going to accept it, even though they are risking their lives because they need it. They are blind to everything else but money because they are needed to money. And under those conditions, by willing to give them this money, wouldn't be really ethical, would it? Because you know they are definitely going to accept it. But nearly definitely. And the results that Zimbardo has reached were still a topic of argument, because Zimbardo has acted to reinforce Guardian's aggression, and it means Guardians didn't get harsh and cruel by just their own will. Instead, they got harsh and cruel because Zimbardo agreed them to test their role's limits, which we call demand characteristics. Subjects behave as what they think the researchers want them to, and this gave us the conclusion of the results are untrustable. In 2019, Zimbardo finally decided to publish his notes, and when the others examined it, they witnessed that even the applicants that accepted weren't really random. They already had symptoms and superior rates of aggression, authoritarianism, narcissistic, and social dominance, and they were surprisingly lack of empathy. Their rates of empathy were unordinarily low, which show us they specifically picked the people who were already inclined into aggression. And another critique was that even though they showed the media as all the guardians became bullies and showed aggression, this wasn't the case. Just 30% of the guardians were showing aggression, and the others were staying in the boundaries that is given to them and were not showing any aggression more than necessary. So even though people who are talking about these experiments say that everyone has a demonic side and when they got the true conditions they will act it out, this is not true. As all the guardians didn't show an extraordinary aggression, not all the people going to be a bad person when they have the right conditions. Because those guardians could stop themselves. So most of the people will be able to do it as well. And at the end, the results didn't show that people who got the power became harsh and show an extraordinary aggression. Instead, majority of people can suppress their urge and we have control as well as responsibility on our actions. And there were some interesting interviews with the subjects. For example, in the interview of 8612, he mentioned that he has done those moves like screaming, yelling, and swearing on purpose to get out of them, and he didn't really lost his mind. But Zimbardo mentioned that they have examined him for a long time and then decided to let him go. So we still don't really know that was he telling the truth or not, because I personally don't really believe that it is really easy to fool a professional psychologist. So I guess this was the end, and I believe the most important thing to learn is we should avoid exaggerated speeds and sources, and instead look up from neutral sources and sites, and not keeping up with the rules that has given to you. No, act how they want, because it's better to have your own characteristic and being yourself.